Pastor Cal, thank you so much for joining me on TPI. I'm so excited to have you here.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, well, look, everyone knows you initially. Well, not everybody. I'm sure you've been ministering and helping couples for years, but the
Right.
wider audience knows you, of course, as Pastor Cal from Married at First Sight. So, how did you get involved in that project?
Oh, wow. Wow. About 15 years ago, I guess a little almost 16 now, my wife and I, we started counseling together and we had an online presence. I mean, we were doing conferences, etc. And we were reached out to by a casting department. And they asked us to help them find a couple for another show. A couple who was having trouble. They were going through some issues and they were going to give them free counseling. I'm like, okay, you know what? Hey, let's give them another perspective. Maybe this will go a little ways to save their marriage. I asked them a lot of questions about it and we decided, okay, fine, we'll find one of our couples. So we talked to the couple. They were like, look, we're willing to try anything. Okay, fine, let's do it. So they went on the show. And during the whole process, they were talking to them so much about what we had talked to them about. They were saying, well, no, that's not what Pastor Cal said. No, that's not what Wendy said. No, that's, and they were just saying that so much that the producer wanted to actually interview us counseling them. Okay. So we did that. And while we were doing it, because look, I didn't know anything about TV. I really knew nothing. So I told them, I said, listen, this is a real counseling session. So you're not gonna stop. I don't want to hear you say that again. There's gonna be none of that. What I'm gonna
Yeah,
do.
we're going to keep it 100%.
1,000. We're gonna keep it for real. And so what happened is that we went through it, and while we were counseling them, I didn't know that the producer and the cameraman, they were all texting the executive producer saying, "You got to see this. You got to see this." So God was at work here because they all texted this person. So then we were contacted later by the executive producer saying, "Hey, look, I need to have lunch with you guys." Fine. So then they want us to work on some other projects, and then they asked me, what would I do to change the show Married at First Sight? What would I do different? And I told them. I said first, well, yeah, okay. I told them, I said, first of all, I would have a counselor who's actually counseled couples because they didn't have a real couples counselor on there prior to me coming.
Hmm.
They had people who were psychologists, psychiatrists. They even had a spiritual advisor who was an atheist. And I said, okay, those are things that need to change because So I was very honest with them, and so they asked me if I'd be a part of the show.
Awesome. Now, why do you think? Because of course, there's Married at First Sight, and there's a lot of shows where they're connecting singles. Why do you think these type of shows are so popular, and why is it so hard for singles to find somebody?
People, oh my God! First of all, people still believe in love. People want love, man. They really, really want it, and I don't. I think that you know these. This is a formula that will never go out of style because people always want love. They want marriage. I don't care what folks say. People want that commitment.
Yep.
I mean, they might say, "Well, no, I don't want, it's a social construct." Yeah, they want marriage. People want marriage. They want commitment. They want somebody
Mhm.
in their life who they feel can put up with their weirdness, their idiosyncrasies, all those little things that nobody else knows about. They want
Yes.
someone who can relate to that. And the reason it's so hard to find is because, oh gosh, how much time do we have, man?
Well, look, I'm single, so I can tell you
What?
too.
We become conditioned to microwave relationships. I
Mhm.
mean, we're conditioned to disposable relationships. We don't want to put in the work, that it takes. I mean, like our parents were married 35 years. My parents were married 35 years, before my dad died. And, other parents married forever, forever. Well, they weren't happy. Well, they made it work.
They made it work.
They made it work. And out of it came you and me and other people, right? They saw the big picture. We don't really want to look at the big picture. We want instant gratification. If he or she doesn't meet up to our very limited expectations, our very high but uninformed expectations, then we bounce, we out of here. So but I think people want it, but we really have to start reorienting and reworking how we think about connecting.
Yeah. This leads me to your book, Marriage Ain't for Punks. Let me tell you. I love the title. I love the book. And I'm just wondering, in this definition in your book, what is a punk in your
Ah,
definition for this book?
a punk is a person, um, either gender, who either has not learned to or refuses to step up to the plate and take accountability for themselves and for others. It's for someone who believes or thinks they want the responsibility of marriage, but are not prepared to take on the weight of marriage. When I was a kid, the one thing you could say to start a fight was to call somebody a punk. Yeah, it meant,
Hmm.
it meant you're not up for the task, right? Look, I believe that if that marriage requires, and this makes marriage sound horrible, it is really not, but marriage requires an incredible amount of maturity. It requires an incredible amount of of intestinal fortitude. You got to push through your own. Most of the stuff you got to push through is you. Not the other person's mess. You got to push through your mess, and
Hmm.
that takes a really mature and adult person. For a man, I read a book years ago called Man of Steel and Velvet. It takes the steel, meaning that I got to push through, I got to be strong, I got to be the house band, the band that surrounds the house, the husband, right? But I also have to be the loving person, the compassionate person. I mean, everybody ain't ready for that.
Yeah. But I think, Pastor Cal, part of the problem is we don't hear about this. We don't hear about this
Yeah.
from our parents. We don't hear about this in church. We don't hear about the weightiness of marriage. It is okay, men, you need to have your money together. Ladies, can you cook? It's the superficial
Hmm.
that, and so people get in it and realize, oh, wait a minute, this is a lot more than what I signed up for.
Yeah.
So, how do you prepare, people who aren't married? What do you say to them?
You know, um, and it's so interesting. So glad you said that we don't hear about it because I think that we are almost afraid to give the real deal. Of what marriage is about. Our church, for instance, I'm actually a pastor. I don't just play one on TV. And my church was actually founded based on relationships. From marriage conferences and what have you. We started gathering people together, and people wanted to come together for worship, et cetera, et cetera. So
Mhm.
we have this church that's basically its foundation of marriage, and we do talk about some of these tough things that come with marriage. The fact that it's not all rainbows and butterflies, and if that's what you're expecting, then you need to wait.
Yeah.
You need to hold up and make sure that you're ready for the gravitas that comes with this thing. And I believe that a lot of times people don't talk about it. First of all, because we're not informed, as to what it takes. Everything else we have knowledge. Everything else in this world we have knowledge. We have training.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to be a mechanic. You have to learn how to be an electrician. You have to learn how to be a pastor. You have to learn how to be a TV host. I mean,
Mhm.
this stuff ain't everybody can't do what you do. I mean, let's just be real. I mean, you're great at it, but everybody can't do that. I mean, there's certain talents and certain. You have to know where to look at the camera. You have to know how to show your best self. You know the right questions to ask. But when it comes to marriage, we don't train people for marriage. We
That
don't
is
train people for it. I mean, you just have to sit at the feet of people who are actually doing this thing right and learn. And I don't think we're ready for that.
Yeah. Now, one thing that really fascinated me when you said in the book that when marriage is done right, it will propel the husband and the wife into their destiny. I
Mm,
mean, can you break that down? Because that just really struck me.
yeah. Okay, I'm going to share with you a very vulnerable. This is a very vulnerable moment here. Okay, I'm a second timer. My wife and I are. We both got married very young, very uninformed. Um, and we did not know what in the world we were doing. We married, not to each other, we married other people, and
Mhm.
we didn't know what we were doing. And those marriages just pretty much crashed and burned. Um, and so when we met each other, we were at such a different place. And we got to the point where we realized as soon as we got together that we need to do something we need to have a marriage goal, right?
Mhm.
What propels a marriage into their destiny is when two people understand, first of all, the purpose of marriage. Marriage is not just about you being fine. It's not just about you fulfilling my needs. It's not just about you meeting my checklist. There's a
Mhm.
purpose to marriage. And when it's done right, when people come together, understanding that, first of all, they're going to come together, two individuals, two intelligent individuals, they're going to come together in order to create something that can change the world, not only their lives, but change the world. And so when we came together, the first thing we said was, what are we going to do to make things different, to make us different, to make our children different, and to make the world we live in different? What can we do? So when I ask people, what is your goal as, what do you want to accomplish? What's your goal? They say, well, we want to be happy. I let them know that's not a goal. Ain't
You're
no
killing
goal.
dreams over here, Pastor Cal.
I'm
You're
sorry. I
killing
know,
all the
man.
hallmark dreams.
I know. But happy is not a goal. A goal, the whole SMART thing. A goal must be specific, must be measurable, must be attainable, it must be relevant, and it must be time sensitive. That's what a goal is. It's a whole SMART acronym. Happiness doesn't fit into that.
Mhm.
Happiness is not time sensitive. You know, happiness is not specific. Happiness is the result of what comes out of you accomplishing whatever your goal is as a marriage. So when you marry the right person, people who have the same values as you marry someone who has the same direction as you marry someone who has the same, or at least they are compatible differences. You're an introvert, she's an extrovert, whatever. As long as they're compatible differences. But if you can marry someone with whom can you can become a better person and you can
Mhm.
accomplish something together, man, you're talking about your destiny. There's no way in the world. I mentioned our previous marriage is because of this. There's no way in the world we could have accomplished what we're accomplishing now if we did not have, if our minds were not and our hearts were not synchronized like they are.
Yeah.
Does that mean that we have no troubles? Absolutely not. We argue, but we argue with a purpose. We
Yeah.
have disagreements, but we realize that ain't nobody going nowhere. It's till death do you part. Involuntarily or voluntarily, you're gonna have to die to leave this. Okay? Period. Okay. So that's what I mean. That when you come into a marriage, understanding that, look, we understand the reason we're together. And it's not just because of little fluff stuff. I want to be happy. Oh, I love you. Yeah, I love my wife, absolutely. But then I have to understand what love actually is. It is more than a feeling. Anyway, I gave you more answer than you asked for.
No, that's fine because that leads me into years ago. I heard when you're talking about love is not a feeling. Years ago, I remember the youth pastor of the church I went to. He was like, "You don't fall in love." He's like, "Love is a choice." He said, "You get up every day and you choose to love the person." And like I said, and our Hallmark Disney uh, television viewing, it's like, no, you just see the person across the room and you connect and you fall in love.
Girl,
But that has deceived many people.
girl.
Deceived many. Can you talk further about love being a choice?
Absolutely. I'm going to go a step further. I teach, and I say this in the book, that you don't fall in love because whenever you fall into anything, you get hurt.
Mhm.
Falling means that I have no control over it. It's like a puddle, a deep puddle. I'm walking along. Oops, I'm in love, or it's like a virus that's floating out there and it catches me. Love found me, and we have this whole mystical idea of what love is. Love is this thing that's floating out there. One day I hope to find love. I hope love finds. No, no. If you're a spiritual person, you understand this. That love requires commitment. It's about commitment. And the best definition of love is Dr. Claude Thomas, my professor in college, said this. He said, love is an intellectual decision we make to fulfill another person's legitimate needs. It's a decision we make to fulfill another person's legitimate needs. It has nothing to do with feeling initially. Now, the feelings make love feel good. The feelings help you stay in the commitment. But love is a commitment. Love is not the feeling. So we don't fall in love. We actually grow in love. Okay? So whenever I talk to people about love, I said, are you growing in love? Falling, you have no responsibility. It just happened to you. But growing, you have all the responsibility because you are making it happen. You're watering it. You're nurturing it. You're planting it. You're making sure it's good. You're making sure it's growing, because that's what love is. That every morning, like your youth pastor said, every morning I'm deciding, but I have to understand that this is the thing that we are growing together. And every negative thing I do is like a plant. My wife and I, we're notorious for not taking care of plants. Okay. Something that, but we've learned, that. And now we're a lot better at plants, Now we know, okay, fine, we actually have to water this thing for it to grow. We actually have to talk to it, actually. So it's a matter of you pouring into each other and deciding. It's almost like this. If I don't always love my job, but I go. Why? Why do you go if you don't love it? Because I'm responsible. Because there's value in it. Because if I don't go, I can't pay my bills.
Exactly.
Because if I go, I can't eat. I ain't got no place to live. So what drives me to that job is the fact that there's value in me doing this thing. And if I do it, there's going to be a return on my investment. Marriage is the same and love is the same. It ain't about me feeling good about it. It's about me doing it, knowing that, hey, look, when I get that check, I'm going to feel good. What I'm saying?
It's funny because I remember my mom telling me as an adult, she's like, she said, I don't know that I really loved your dad when we got married. I said, what? She said, I grew to love him.
Yes.
She said, I grew to love him. But I was looking at her like, but they were married before my dad passed. They were married 36 years.
Yeah. She got it.
And I often thought about that. And I was just thinking, like, how you marry somebody you don't love? But listening to you, I understand where she was coming from.
Absolutely.
And that point. But one other, you make so many points in the book. I want to move on to communication, because I think communication is probably one of the biggest issues. Even just when I communicate with friends, sometimes there's miscues, missteps, even with people I've known for a long time. So one thing you say, don't communicate. Punks don't like to communicate. Can you explain that so we can all kind of put a mirror up to ourselves to see are we punks or not punks in this situation?
In that chapter, I talk about the 7 pathways of communication, and what's so interesting is that whenever a couple comes to me and says, you know what, we're having trouble, we're not communicating, I tell them, no, that's not true. You are communicating. You're not communicating effectively. Everybody communicates. You communicate through your words, you communicate through your actions, you communicate through your eyes, you communicate through the sound of your voice, you communicate through the haptics, or your touch, your gestures. You communicate through so many ways. And what I found is that when we talk about communication as a problem in marriages, it's not necessarily the fact that we're not communicating, is that we don't understand all the nuts and bolts that go into communicating and communicating effectively so that the other person understands and that we understand them, et cetera, et cetera. Think of it like this. 2 individuals who marry are 2 incredibly intelligent people. These people have goals. They're moving in this direction, right? They're moving. They're all of a sudden now they come together. Boom. Oh, wait a minute. Now we have our individual and we have our collective now. So how do we do this? Because now we have to move collectively, but we still want to move individually, right? So what happens, this is all about communication. What happens is that individually we can do fine. When we become collective, now it's like, okay, which direction do we go? How do we do this thing? So it takes constant coming together, smoothing off the rough edges so we can move together. And then eventually we start coming, okay, wait a minute. Okay, let's come back together. Let's smooth off these rough edges so we can understand each other where we're going. Okay, all right, good. We grow, then okay, wait, let's come back together. Every time we come back together, there's friction. Every time we come back together, there's an argument. But arguments are not bad. Arguments
Mhm.
simply, these are two intelligent people trying to reach some kind of synergy, trying to come together so we can understand each other, so we can move together. And that's how we have to look at communication. Look at the root word of communication is to commune. It's to commune, it's to be in communion, okay? Which means coming together. And when people say, we're not communicating, they're saying we're not connecting.
Mhm.
We're not feeling each other's heart. I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know what you're feeling. And when we can come together and commune together, sometimes it may not be talking. Sometimes you simply need to spend time together. Shut up and just spend time together. And you're going to find that your spirits are going to start to connect. Once your spirits start to connect, then you start to commune. With my wife and I, sometimes, our biggest challenge is that we're working together all the time, and you can kind of easily miss each other.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to come together and spend time, period.
Now, you mentioned in this also
Mhm.
arguments, which a
Yeah,
lot of people think arguing is a bad thing, but you say that there's a way to argue effectively.
absolutely.
How is that?
Not attaching the person to the problem. And that's difficult. Again, marriage ain't for punks, though. But
Mhm.
not attaching the person to the problem. Arguing is the only thing arguing is two people trying to find a solution. It doesn't mean anybody's wrong. Doesn't mean but these are just two intelligent people trying to find solutions. When people tell me, "Well, we don't argue," well, then my response is, "You're probably not talking or you're not thinking." Okay, because any two people who are going to come together, and if they're thinking people, they're going to have disagreements. It's just the way it is. The question is, how do we have these debates? How do we have these differences of opinion and still keep moving in a positive direction? I look at it like this. When people have a debate, first of all, we call it marriage math, and I put this in the book. You have to understand that when you're arguing, everyone has some culpability, everyone has some responsibility in whatever that issue is. The math goes like this. If I am 80% responsible for the issue and you are 20% responsible for the issue, you are 100% responsible for your 20%. And I'm 100% responsible for my 80%. So we all have culpability. Or let's say if you are 99% responsible and I'm 1% responsible. We just did a conference recently and we were talking about this, and someone was thinking, well, I'm look, my husband's 100% responsible. I was like, well, yeah, but you married him. So they give you at least 1%. Okay. That gives you at least 1% responsibility. But whatever your responsibility is, you take 100% responsibility for that 1%. And then you take that argument, whatever that debate is, understanding we both have skin in the game. We both
Yeah.
can say that we were wrong here. Somebody said, well, what if he cheats? What if she cheats? Yes, but when people cheat, there's something going on. I'm not blaming the victim, but there's something going on that both people need to talk about. You
Yeah.
take the problem, you put it on a shelf, just hypothetically, you put it on a shelf, and you as a couple look at that problem and say, you know what, that thing is an enemy to our marriage. How do we, as a
Mm.
corporate unit, attack that issue?
Yeah.
Not each other, because you're not attaching the person to the problem. You're separating the problem, you're objectifying it, and you're talking about the issue.
I like that. I mean, like I said, I've never been married. I just have a lot of friends
It's
who are
coming.
married, and I just listen, but as I'm listening to them talk about the things, I'm like, okay, y'all are attacking each other, but that's not the core problem. The core problem is something else that you're not going to get to the bottom of it, because But the point is, I can say that because I don't have
You're
any
not in
feelings
it.
in this. I'm
Yeah,
outside of the situation. But
yeah,
when you're in it and there's
yeah,
feelings and I've been wronged, and I mean, how do you get
yeah,
beyond that? Because you do talk about when you reach the point of apology, a way to apologize and the
yeah,
importance of
yeah,
forgiveness.
yeah, yeah.
Can you discuss that?
Absolutely. And I think that is the first step. First of all, acknowledging. My wife is big on accountability and being introspective, knowing yourself and then taking responsibility for yourself. But as far as apologizing, that is always the first step. I have a statement, a sort of a thing that we say in conferences, and our church couples say it all the time: run to reconcile, which means
Mhm.
whoever is the first to acknowledge the problem, again, makes no difference whose fault it is, run to reconcile. You should be trying to race each other to say, I'm sorry. You should be running to reconcile because you understand the big picture. You understand the value here. You understand that if we don't do this, it's going to be like a cancer in our relationship. So you run to reconcile. And the best kind of apology is a proactive apology. And the proactive apology is when I don't need nobody to tell me that I messed up. As soon as I recognize the issue, I go and I say, you know what? I messed up. I I can't. I messed up. I take full responsibility. I don't care what your part is in it. I take full responsibility for what happened. I am sorry. That's proactive. Now, what often happens is that people have reactive apologies, where they're only apologizing after they've been caught, or after they've been told that something was wrong. And then you react and you say, oh, wow, okay, okay, I'm sorry. That it doesn't sound as sincere, but
Mm.
sometimes I know you did wrong. And if you know something and you're reacting to it, that's perfectly okay, but it's not as effective as a proactive apology. And then there are what we call inactive apologies, where you're not going to say, I'm sorry. You're just going to act like everything okay because your pride won't let you say, I'm sorry. It just ain't
Mhm.
gonna let you. So you're gonna just say, yeah, well, yeah, you're gonna treat her or treat him as though you're sorry, as though you've apologized. I'm gonna just treat you right. And people say this. I've heard people say this, especially if they've cheated on their spouse or something. Oh, I'm gonna take that to the grave. I'm just gonna treat her better. Nah, well, you know what? You're taking the responsibility. You're taking her choice away. You're taking his choice away because
Mhm.
they need to have the option to forgive because forgiveness is powerful. So by you not apologizing and acknowledging, you're taking away that person's ability or opportunity rather to experience forgiveness.
And apology and forgiveness both takes a high level of vulnerability, and you talk about that.
Ooh.
So share the power of being vulnerable, and how do you find the
Yeah,
courage to be vulnerable? Because that's hard.
yeah.
That's a
It
hard thing.
it is. It is. I have to look at it like in the eyes of my relationship with God, because when I look at vulnerability and forgiveness, it's like when I understand the fact that at the cross, Jesus forgave me for my sins, my past sins. He forgave my sin condition, my present sin condition, and he's offering forgiveness for my future sins, things that I might commit in the future. All I have to do is acknowledge and run to him. Now, if we are forgiven for our past, present, and future, and as a believer, all we have to do is accept that forgiveness. And then Jesus turn right around and says, as I have forgiven you. Now you got to forgive somebody else. Forgive us of my trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. What are you talking about, Jesus? He's saying here, the same kind of forgiveness I've given you, you got to forgive, you got to give somebody else. That means I got to forgive you for what you did. I got to
Ooh.
forgive you for who you are. And I got to forgive the possibility that you might do it again. That's deep. And that
That's deep.
requires some serious soul searching. And you're talking about being naked in front of God. For you to exhibit that kind of forgiveness, you have to be butterball button naked in front of
Yes.
God. I'm serious. But so when we talk about vulnerability, that vertical openness, that vertical nakedness that we have in front of God, it's hard for us to have it horizontally
Yeah.
if we don't experience it vertically. It's almost
Be-
impossible, you know?
well, we can experience with God because one, we know God's not going to tell our business. God not going to judge us. It's easy with Him because it's like, okay, I know that there's an everlasting love here, but I
Yeah,
don't know if the love of a spouse will be
yeah,
as everlasting, and as deep as the
yeah.
Lord. So I get the
You but you ain't going quite there yet. But okay, let me tell you something. I talk about Wendy a lot, my wife, but I'm gonna say this thing that she said one time. She was praying, she was asking God, how do I show love to other people? How do you, God, want me to show love to people? And the answer came back from the book of First John. How do you want me to love you, rather? How do you want me to love you? How do I show you I love you? And the answer is by loving other people. The only way that we can love God is through loving someone else, because God doesn't really need our love. Let's just be real with it. God don't need our love. I mean, he's not insecure. He's not incomplete. "Oh, I need you to love me. I need no God. No. He's God. He all right. God needs you to love other people through His love,
Mhm.
and He needs you to have that same confidence that I'm going to take care of this person and let them love you just like you loving me. You understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
while
I
I
get
get what you're
you.
saying, it's hard to trust. I get that, but it's required in marriage that you do.
So this is I'm gonna hit this point because this was powerful to me in the book where you discuss this young man who got married and then he called you and was like, you know what, I got to sleep with the same person, one person for forever. I can't have no no outside people. And you talked about this idea of, let me make sure I got it right. Is it, instead of just sleeping with someone, an actual, is it sexual exchange, was that the term,
Mhm,
the idea
mhm,
that you used?
mhm.
Can you go into that just a little bit more, because that to me was,
Yeah,
because a lot of people talk about that. A lot of people are like, look, I'm not built just to be with one person for the rest of my life.
yeah, that,
And
yeah,
but there's a lack of connection there. Can you share how people can get, or couples can get more connected?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. The whole idea of that sexual interchange is when there's a reason that we're told that we become one flesh, and there's even scientific evidence which says that when we actually have sexual connections with people, that it's more than just physical. There's a body of work out there which indicates that there's some kind of chemical exchange that's going on. There's some kind of, and we know, if you're a believer, we know that there's a spiritual exchange that's going on.
Mhm.
And so if you think about this, I mean, we call them soul ties or what have you. When you think about this, if my exchanging with another person, and speaking in reference, I'm thinking about this gentleman, but in speaking in reference to that, if I believe that I'm not made to connect with one person, then I'm saying, in essence, that the way God made it is not good. The way God designed it is not good, because I need to have my soul spread out among different people. I need to have my spirit among different people. That's not how we're made. That's not how we're made. Men are made, I don't want to get too graphic. Men are made with one thing, okay?
Mhm.
Just one thing. And women got just one thing, right? And there's one thing supposed to go with that one thing, and those two connect. There are animals that mate for life. Animals. that without any, I think penguins mate for life, without any kind of moral wolves, without any kind of moral underpinning, they know to mate for life. Yet humans, we talk about how no, well, I'm not. No, what you're saying is that your lust will not allow you to mate for life. But again, this has to do with your understanding your spiritual connection, and this whole idea of two becoming one flesh just means that when the way that we've been designed is when that male joins that female, and that connection happens, um, that is something that becomes divine. I sincerely believe that. I mean, I can't say that on the show, but that's something that becomes divine. I believe that, because when we were created, and I'm so happy for this because I can talk spirituality here, so
Yes, this is
without
a
being,
treat.
without having to be anything, right? But I believe the way we're designed, that all the masculine traits of God are put into men. All the feminine, softer, nurturing traits of God are put into women.
Mhm.
So it takes both man and female, male and female, man and woman, together to fully represent the image of God. I believe that we both together represent that image of God. I don't think that it's a matter of women being a, a second thought. God said, "Oh, man's alone. Oh, I got to do something. Let me find him a woman." No, 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 no. Women were designed from the beginning. They were in the mind of God from the beginning. I'm going to make someone for you. I'm going to make someone for you. So those two together fully represent the image of God. So when a man and woman come together in that sexual interchange, they are representing something bigger than themselves. They're representing what God is like and who God is.
Do you believe that that's why God just has sex for marriage, for those
Yeah,
very reasons you just stated?
yeah, absolutely. I believe it's for marriage. Now, that being said, I don't believe it's only for procreation.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I
I
understand.
mean, God could have made sex very clinical. When He created Adam and Eve, it could have been a very clinical thing. We're just gonna get together and poof, here comes a baby. No, but He gave you some feelings to go with it. He gave you some explosions. I mean, am I getting too graphic? But you
No,
understand what I'm saying? He gave you some explosiveness to go with this thing, which hey, he's like, hey, you're gonna make a baby and it's gonna be good while you're doing it. So I believe, I sincerely believe that that inside marriage is the best and the most rewarding uh, experience, sexual experience, intimate experience that two people can have, because it's not just about sex; it's about joining. It's about joining spirits.
Mhm.
It's about joining that emotional energy. Once people have been married for years and years and years and years, and I've talked to older couples also, counseled older couples. When you're first married, I mean, you breaking the chandeliers and knocking over tables and stuff, and multiple times an hour. But but after you've been married for years and years and years, you don't have to do that anymore, because now it's not about frequency. As I heard one pastor say, it's not about the frequency. God replaces frequency with intensity.
Mm.
You know, and so it's kind of like now the thing that has replaced the frequency and the desire to be all over the place is that I have this person who knows me. I mean, knows me,
Mhm.
who's a witness to my existence, who knows me so well. And whether we having sex or whether we just sitting around watching a movie, or whether we're reading a book, whether we're just walking around or whatever, wow, what a privilege it is to have this person in my life. And they don't look as fine as they used to look to other people.
But they find it you.
And people, let me just say this. A couple that's been married 50, 60 years, they walk around in their 80s and 90s, they don't look sexy. I mean,
They may look sexy to each other.
that's the point.
To each
They don't
other.
look sexy, but to each other, it ain't about looks anymore.
Mhm.
For men, I mean, gravity took its toll. But you look at these couples, and they're old, and their bodies have been worn through time, but their love is so deep and their connection is so solid. And they may not even be able to have sex anymore. And it ain't even about that.
But it's
It's
the
about
intimacy.
it's the intimacy. Into me, see into me. And that's the whole thing. Well, okay, that's
Now,
go ahead. Next.
I do have to touch on this point because for many couples, divorce is a reality. It's a
Yes,
reality of the day that we live in. Many couples, I know several people who've gotten divorced.
absolutely.
And I know you talk about fighting through, for your marriage and staying in there, but when do you reach the point where it's like, okay, we got to throw the towel in?
Yeah, yeah. There's a in the book. There's a chapter called "When It's Time to Punk Out," and I'm not the guy. I'm not the pastor, and I know what the Bible says. God hates divorce. I get it. Um, I understand. I also know that there are a number of biblical characters who were divorced, who have multiple wives. David sinned with Bathsheba, and after he sinned, he wrote the psalm which says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me."
Mhm.
And when God came to David after he had sinned and sent Bathsheba's husband to be murdered in the war, sent him to the front of the war, and God sent Nathan the prophet to talk to David about it, he said something very interesting. He said, "David, why did you take this man's one little one little lamb, when you had all these others?" And this blew my mind. He says, "I would have given you wives, plural." So wait a minute, what are you talking about? Okay, because David was married to Michael, he was married to Bathsheba. After that, David was married to a whole lot of folk, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what am I saying? I'm saying the marriage always doesn't turn out like we expect it to, and God understands. That doesn't mean that it's okay for people to divorce. As I told you, my wife and I, we're second timers, and it was very bad. We had to get out. Um, and I believe that if your life is in danger, if you feel as though this person is damaging you emotionally to the point where you can no longer, where you're losing your connection with God and your connection to yourself, there may be drug abuse. There may be situations where you are just beyond help, or she or he is beyond help. Then that may be the only option, is to leave. There are situations where people have had multiple affairs, and that is just a part of who they are, and they will not stop. Well, no, I mean, this is where churches tick me off because no, you got to stay with that person. You got to stay. No, you stay with them. You
Look,
let that
I've
be
said the
you, and
same
you
thing.
stay with
Like,
them.
I'm like,
Hey,
no,
I mean, you
no.
understand what I'm saying? But we have this weird idea that, well, you know what, God wants you. Stop telling me what God wants. I talked to God. Okay. I talked to him 5 minutes ago. I know what God wants. And if God leads you and God says it's time for you to throw in the towel, then hey, look, it ain't my word. That's his word. So I do believe, but that being said, I do believe in marriage. I do believe we want to fight for marriage. In fact, I've been criticized on the show quite often is that Pastor Cal wants everybody to work. Yeah, I do. I want them to fight. I don't want
Yeah.
them to give up because I believe it can work. I
Hmm.
want them to fight through it. But I still understand that, does it always work? No, it does not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
when it doesn't, Wendy and I, we actually counsel people in pre-divorce counseling, showing them how to get out, remain civil, right? And still maintain their connection with God and connection with each other if need be. So I mean, it happens, but
Now, you and your wife, speaking of the counseling, you guys do boot camps, you guys do all kind of conferences, and you also have an app that
yeah.
as well. So, with all these things that you're doing, what is your goal in doing everything that you do?
Our goal is to make sure that people experience the absolute beauty and joy of human connection. Our goal is to make sure that when people decide to be married, that they are experiencing every bit of positivity, every bit of love that they can, that they're entering into something that's going to be transformative for their lives and for the lives around them. So the reason we did the app was because we get so many requests for counseling, and it's impossible to reach all those. So
Hmm.
what we did was that we developed this app. The app is called Marriage Ain't for Punks. Well, it's being rebranded now as MAPS, which is a Navigation for Real Relationship, which is an acronym for Marriage Ain't for Punks. A loose acronym for Marriage Ain't for Punks, MAPS. But the idea here is we want in the app. It's one app with three applications. We have a married side where there are resources galore for married people, and we're still developing. We've launched. We're in beta stage right now, so we're working out bugs, but it's really going great. And so we have resources for married people. We have coaching for people who are in dating, committed relationships. And we have values-based matchmaking also. All three in one app. I think it's the first time that I've ever seen this. But one thing that's so cool about it on the single side is that you're going to match based on values. So there are no pictures. There is no swiping.
Oh, and so okay, so that sounds interesting. So
Mhm.
it's just you're
You have
just matching them
an avatar.
together based on values.
You have an avatar. You create that avatar and you take inventories, and we determine what your values are, and we connect you based on values. And only after you've connected can you then do an in-app live feature where you can actually see the person.
Now, have y'all launched this already?
The app is in the app stores under Marriage Ain't for Punks. Now, the matchmaking is about to launch. The matchmaking
Okay.
inside the app, but singles are still in the app right now. They're communicating in the app, and they have the freedom to use all the other options, all the other things. Right now, the app is being downloaded and for free, so you can get in it right now for free. I said right now for free. So go in and do that. And in addition to that, we have lives. In fact, I'm going to do a live every Tuesday and every Thursday. We have lives where another feature is that we're able to present to the entire app, all three categories of the app, via live video, just like you and I are doing. We can
Hmm.
present that to everyone. The live button comes on, you click it, and there I am, or there are other experts there talking to you in real time about relationships and what have you. I have the option to ask questions. We're talking about some crazy stuff, some powerful stuff. We're talking about gaslighting. We talk about value. What is a high value person? I mean, we go in, and people ask questions, and it's really, really exciting. So you have the lives, you have the communities, you have AI is infused in it, where you can ask Pastor Cal questions via AI, and you get answers. It's just phenomenal.
Well, Pastor Cal, thank you so much. I know I learned a lot. And if nobody else got anything, I learned a lot today. But
Bless
I'm
your
sure
heart.
our audience loved it. And don't forget Pastor Cal's book, Marriage Ain't for Punks. Check
Yeah.
out the app. Look, we're gonna check out the app. I got a lot of single friends. I'm like, look, let's get in on this
Yes, sir.